Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. When my wife and I bought our dream home in the suburbs last year, we thought we had found our perfect little slice of paradise. The house was move-in ready with a big backyard for our kids to play in, and the neighborhood seemed so charming and peaceful, with kids riding bikes down the quiet streets and neighbors waving hello. Boy, were we wrong. It all started about a month after we moved in. I was planting some bushes along the fence separating our yard from our neighbor Helen's when she suddenly marched over. Helen was the head of the homeowners association board and took her self-appointed role very seriously. "Excuse me, but you can't plant there," she barked at me, hands on her hips. I paused, trowel in hand. "I'm pretty sure this is my property," I said calmly. "Absolutely not," Helen snapped. "This fence and everything on that side belongs to the homeowner association. Read your bylaws." I knew for a fact the bylaws stated no such thing, but I didn't want to get into an argument with my new neighbor. So I just muttered an apology and went back inside to pull out my property survey. Just as I thought, the survey clearly showed the fence and yard behind it were part of my land. Taking a deep breath, I went back outside and politely showed Helen the property map. "See, this survey shows the fence and yard are on my property," I explained, but Helen refused to look at it. "I don't care what that says. This is homeowner association land," she exclaimed. "Tear out those bushes or I'll call the homeowner association lawyer." Now I was starting to get upset at her irrational behavior. "Helen, if you won't even look at the official survey, I don't know what to tell you. This is my property, and I have the right to landscape it how I want." I thought that would be the end of it, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail informing me the homeowner association was fining me $200 for unsanctioned landscaping on homeowner association property, plus they were billing me for the removal of the bushes. I couldn't believe it. Over the next few weeks, tensions escalated as I refused to pay the bogus fines. Helen kept confronting me anytime I went into my backyard, threatening to call the cops. I started avoiding my own yard just to get some peace. But the harassment continued, with daily letters from the homeowner association about accumulating fines and fees. It came to a head one Saturday when I stepped outside to find Helen in my backyard with a tape measure. She was meticulously measuring the distance between the fence and my house, scribbling notes on a pad. I'd had enough. "Get off my property right now!" I yelled. "This is not your property. I'm collecting evidence for the homeowner association lawsuit," she said smugly. That was the last straw. I called the police and 2 officers showed up just as Helen scurried back to her own yard. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," I said with relief. "My neighbor keeps trespassing and harassing me, despite my repeatedly showing her it's my property." The cops listened sympathetically as I explained the full crazy saga and showed them my deed, survey, and property map. "Sorry for the trouble, ma'am, but this land clearly belongs to him," one officer said to Helen. "You need to stop trespassing and settle this civilly with the homeowner association." But to my shock, Helen burst into tears. "He's bullying me," she sobbed. "As a single woman, I feel so threatened. This land belongs to our community." The cops immediately tensed up and turned on me. "Sir, we take accusations of intimidation very seriously," the officer said with a frown. "What? But she's the one harassing me." I tried to explain, but the cops didn't want to hear it. "We recommend you try to resolve this peacefully through the proper channels," he lectured. "If we get any more complaints of intimidation, you'll be the one facing charges." I stood there, mouth agape in disbelief as the cops gave me one more warning glare before driving off. Helen shot me a smug little smile before scurrying back into her house. I'd never felt so frustrated and powerless. My neighbor had spun complete lies to the cops and they'd taken her side despite all my concrete proof. Over the next few weeks, the harassment escalated. Every time I went into my backyard, Helen would come outside screaming that I was trespassing. She took pictures of me constantly to document my bullying behavior. Fed up, I decided to get an attorney to deal with this insanity. But lawyers are expensive, and I was worried the legal fees would bankrupt our family before this could get resolved. That's when my friend recommended I post about the situation online to see if anyone had advice. And that's how I ended up spilling this whole crazy story on Reddit. Within hours, supportive comments and advice came pouring in from folks who dealt with similar homeowner association nonsense. A few Redditors even helped me look up Helen's history and discovered she had pulled similar stunts with past neighbors. Armed with pages of evidence and advice from the Reddit crowd, I decided to take one more shot at reasoning with Helen for the sake of keeping the peace. The next day, I approached her fence and called over politely, "Helen, I have something important I'd like to discuss with you." Her back door flew open and Helen stormed out holding a can of mace. "Get away from me, you crook! I'm calling the cops!" she shouted. I held up my hands pleadingly. "Please, Helen, let's be civil and talk this out." But she kept screaming and now the mace was pointed right at me. Knowing I had to document her aggression, I pulled out my phone and started filming. "I'm asking you politely to speak with me. Please put the mace down," I said calmly as I recorded. "Help! He's threatening me! He's got a gun!" Helen suddenly shrieked. I didn't even have time to react before 2 patrol cars came screeching down the street, sirens blaring. 4 cops jumped out, guns drawn. "Drop your weapon and put your hands up," one yelled. "Officers, this is all a misunderstanding," I tried to explain while keeping my phone held up. "I'm unarmed, just trying to settle a property dispute." But it was no use. The cops rushed over and roughly cuffed me, ignoring my protests. I begged them to just look at my phone footage, but they weren't having it. As the stunned neighbors looked on, I was shoved into the back of a cop car and hauled down to the station. The officers refused to even consider my evidence, dismissing me as some deranged lunatic. It was the most hopeless feeling, being labeled dangerous and unstable when all I'd tried to do was reason with this unhinged woman. I knew if I couldn't get someone to actually look at my proof, I could end up getting convicted of crimes I didn't commit. By some miracle, when I was allowed my phone call, I was able to reach one of the helpful Redditors who'd commented on my post. I gave him a quick rundown of the arrest, and he immediately offered to bring my documentation to the station. A few hours later, I was sitting in a holding cell when a detective came to get me. "We viewed your neighbor's video and the documentation," he said with a frown. "You're free to go, and we will start an investigation into possible false reporting by the complainant." I almost cried with relief. Thanks to my meticulous records and the help of caring strangers, I'd managed to escape this insane legal nightmare. My neighbor is now facing charges for falsifying reports, and I'm meeting with lawyers about suing her and the homeowner association for harassment. It's been a long battle, but now when I look out at my yard, I feel a sense of peace and victory. With the law on my side, that crazy homeowner association Helen has finally met her match. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So, just for a bit of context, my mom and dad own a plant nursery. From what I was told, our annoying neighbor was a retired lawyer with too much time on his hands, and he lived just down the hill from us and owned a dam as well. So let's get into this, for it is long. This happened a few years ago when I was in year 11 of my high school, about mid-autumn. Keep in mind this is Australia, so it is extremely dry. We received a formal complaint from our annoying neighbor. This wasn't a big shock because at this stage, we were getting formal complaints from him every 2 weeks or so, anything from too much noise to yes, too little noise. Our dog, our hill eroding, anything this guy could think of. It came in his usual lawyer-styled letters. Anyway, this guy had written us a letter claiming we had infected his water with blue-green algae, and we would have to pay all damages to his property, including vet bills for his horses. Now, my mom and dad were furious with this guy because when we were having our dam built, this guy kept complaining about how the runoff from our pots would change the nutrient level in the water. So when Dad built this, he went all out. He had a natural filtration system with 2 smaller dams that all water would go through first, filled with natural water filter plants, reeds and other plants. Then it would go through a chlorinator, and finally, a pumped filter. Every month, Dad would backwash the mains into the dam to keep the dam at the right pH and pump the water constantly to keep it aerated. So my parents replied with a flat no. So our neighbor makes his biggest mistake and calls Melbourne Water to look at our dam and to test the water, and guess who had to pay for the water testing fee? So the Melbourne Water guy gets there and is quite upset because his co-worker called in sick, and he is going to have to collect water samples from all water inflows and overflows in the dam itself by himself, do salinity tests, pH tests, and send samples back to the lab for further testing. I thought it was interesting because I was studying chemistry at the time, so I went out to talk to him about it. He looks at our setup and, to say the least, was pretty impressed. He asks why it was getting reviewed one. due to how dry it is and how water isn't overflowing from our dam to his. And 2. Why it is the neighbor getting reviewed due to he is the one with blue-green algae. He soon gets explained all the trouble our neighbor gives us and expresses his sympathy. When he is about to finish up, he suddenly asks about the fence line that goes through the annoying neighbor's dam, and I tell him about how a few years back, the neighbor had told us to reinstall our connecting fence to keep our dog in, and how Dad had to pay for it all. Dad was upset and decided to review our property border, and didn't give up a centimeter of land to this guy, even if it went through his dam. Now the Melbourne water guy smiles and says, "Well, I'll have to get a sample of that as well, won't I, since it is your water." After this, he talks to my parents about our options and says that the review will be scheduled soon about the water contamination. By the way, I was not present for the meeting. Mum and Dad relayed the whole thing to me. Anyway, going on. So about a month later, the council has us sit down for a meeting with the annoying neighbor there, and all he knew was it was about contamination of water, and he is looking smug. Then it starts. Melbourne water guy goes on to state that the contamination did not come from our dam, and likely came from the annoying neighbor's horse poo runoff into his dam, but without further testing on the annoying neighbor's property, there would be no conclusive evidence. Annoying neighbor just looks confused because why have a council meeting for this? But Melbourne water guy isn't done yet. He then goes on to state that there has been, in fact, contamination to our water from his as we have a cubic meter of water coming across from his dam. I heard he just went pale as he realized what this meant for him. He would have to pay us for the damage. He quickly got composure and claimed that we do not use that cubic meter of water and therefore do not have damage. It was my mom's turn now. She got up and told the council she wanted to use this water for a water exhibit for our plant range, for when customers came over to look at our plants, but could not do so with the water contaminated. The council had already seen the plans and agreed. So the annoying neighbor was then forced to pay for Melbourne Water to come out and determine where the contamination was, and then set up a filtration system similar to ours, which cost Dad about $20,000, to decontaminate the water so we could do our water garden. The next one is a petty revenge story. On a day I was off work, I was craving a sandwich at lunchtime on a hot day. I traveled to the nearest subway and got in line. As it was noontime, there were quite a few people in line, and as many places, they seemed understaffed. I get this, everyone is nothing the store can do but what they can. The young teenage girl was the only one to make sandwiches, while a manager was ringing up the orders when not helping with condiments. So while waiting in line at Subway with like 6 others, I was behind a group of 3 old ladies, the Karens of this story. While not the spitting image of most Karens, you could tell from how they talked with each other they were the kind of women with resting bitch faces. So it came time to have their sandwiches made, and of course every one of them wanted a very custom sandwich. This meat, that cheese is a little too much. I want it toasted off. That is too much. I want to switch the bread. On and on, it was annoying as the one girl tried to keep up but was getting frustrated and stressed. Then the manager stepped over trying to help, but with these women, they were not happy with anything. After 15 minutes of making each of these ladies sandwiches, it finally came time to pay. Down to the register they went as my meatball sub was quickly made and passed down. I am plain bread, meat, and sauce, a little ranch, so I waited behind them. The manager rang up the old bats, and when the total came out to around $30-ish, they went off again. I'm not saying that they started to squeal. We waited forever to be served, and then you two couldn't even make a sandwich. "We want it free," they whined. I was fed up with it, and after it continued for a few minutes, I stepped up and said I'd take the sandwiches and add them to mine. The old crows grinned and thought they had one. I paid for the 4 sandwiches now and added my drink and chips. After my card was approved and I was handed my receipt, I picked up my newly 4-bought sandwiches and got my drink. As I started paying, the old ladies went to sit at a table. After getting my drink, I headed to the door to leave with my food in hand. Excuse me, you have our food still. Are you not going to bring it to us?" Receipt in hand, holding it up. "Nope, I paid my money for my food and will take them back to work." As I headed to the door, this got the old idiots to get up and chase me out the door, which I didn't mind. The staff had enough of them, and I can take some abuse from crazies. "You need to give us our food, or we will call the cops and have you arrested." I knew this was dumb, but as I said, nothing better on a day off. Please be my guest. I assure you they won't be doing anything about this. One of them started to pull out a phone and call while the others began telling me how I must love stealing from old ladies and how they knew this person or that person and I would be in jail for a long time. Well, they called. I stood there not saying a word, which is hard to do being belittled, but I had the store crowd watching by this point. Soon enough, a few units pulled in, and as they got out, a look of confusion crossed their face. Of course, are you the guy they called about because you matched the description? Me. Yay, I am what they call in on me. OFC. You stole their sandwiches and demanded money from them. Me. Well, look into it, ask the clerk and manager who paid for the sandwiches, and look at this receipt. One officer walked in, spoke with the store, and watched the video while the other listened to these women insinuate that I took the food from them. The shock was priceless once the other came out and confirmed I paid for them, and the store also wanted the three trespassed for a disturbance. I was released to leave, but decided to go back in and eat. The three were banned and left with an even more sour look, and the manager brought over a cookie, telling me it was on her. The next one is an entitled people story. So this isn't my story, but it's from one of my friends. This happened a long time ago, and names and some details have been changed to protect the innocent. My friend, who I'll call Lucy, lives in a town with a pretty good-sized army base. To make some money between semesters of college, Lucy took a summer job as a waitress at a local restaurant that is popular with the officers and their families. Lucy is liked as a waitress to the point that patrons will ask to be seated in her section. But you're not here for that story, are you? You're here for the entitled people. And oh boy, did Karen not disappoint. It was a Friday evening, so it was packed. There's at least an hour wait, the kitchen is bustling, and Lucy and her coworkers are on their toes. Fortunately, it's mostly regulars, so they're patient and even leaving nice tips and paying compliments to the wait staff owner. Enter Karen. Karen, who Lucy had never seen before, was seated in Lucy's section and begins the usual Karen tirades, complaining about the wait, sending her pasta dish back a total of 3 times because it wasn't cooked just right, husband's rank name dropping, yada, yada, yada. Lucy, easily the most patient and kind-hearted person I've ever met, but even she was getting frustrated. Then the bombshell dropped. Like most places in this town, the restaurant offers a military discount. However, thanks to this being abused in the past, people wanting the military discount must show their military ID to qualify. There are signs posted on the doors and in the menu stating this. Most patrons are understanding of this, but as you can guess, Karen is not one of those people. It's time for the check, and Karen asks for the military discount. Lucy, polite as ever, asks for Karen's military ID. Karen, what did you say? Lucy, can you please present your military ID for the discount? Karen, don't you know who I am? Lucy, I'm sorry, ma'am, but company rules state that your ID must be shown to get the discount. Karen, are you calling me a liar? Lucy, no ma'am, but in order to qualify for the discount, you must show your military ID. Karen, my husband is Kyle married to Abward. He's a second low-teed at the army base, and he knows people. Lucy is trying to keep her cool, but she told me that she wanted to cry. Karen, I know people. I can make sure you never get a job in this town again. You're so stupid. You're probably some college dropout who will never amount to anything. By this point, everyone is silent, and even the owner is coming over. An older woman from another section, who Lucy has never seen before either, gets up and comes over. The woman, who I'll call Belle, taps Karen on the shoulder. Karen stops her tirade, whips around, her face turning 50 shades of red and purple, stares Belle down. Karen, what do you want? Belle, calm. You're going to apologize to this young lady, pay in full, and leave a generous tip. Karen, who the frick are you? Belle, someone who can make things very difficult for your husband. Karen, I don't have to stand for this. Grabs her purse. I'll tell so many people just how much this place sucks that nobody will want to come here anymore. Karen storms off, pushing the owner hard enough for him to fall to the ground and left. According to Lucy, it was so silent that you can hear a pin drop for at least a minute. Belle helps the owner to his feet, makes sure he's okay, then turns to Lucy. Belle, are you okay? Lucy, still shaken. Thank you, I'm okay. Belle, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the base. That was completely uncalled for. Turns to owner. I'd also like to compensate for the meal and tip as an apology. Owner, there's no need, ma'am. Belle, I insist. Owner, thank you, ma'am. Belle returned to her seat and the night continued. Belle and her husband came by to check on Lucy before leaving and promised to come back for dinner the next Friday. It wasn't until Monday afternoon when Kyle went to the restaurant to apologize that Lucy learned what went down. It turned out that Belle was the Major General who had just been posted to the base. That morning, Belle had him summoned to her office for a little chat. Because it happened off base, he was mortified and offered to reimburse Belle for the check tip. He didn't get into trouble. However, he was warned that Karen's behavior could make things difficult for his career. He made sure Karen got a verbal got torn up one side and down the other on the phone when he was done. In this town, gossip spreads faster than the flu. Karen never darkened the door of the restaurant again, but the rest of the town made sure Karen knew she wasn't welcome. Belle kept her word and showed up every Friday evening for dinner with her husband. According to Lucy, she was a classy lady. And even if she didn't sit in Lucy's section, she'd make sure to tell Lucy hello and leave her a nice tip. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.